Right, ladies and gentlemen, it has turned 6 o'clock, so we will make a start on this evening's Cabinet meeting. Thank you all for attending tonight. There are a number of members of the public here, so I will read out the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure all your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. I'm also advising that this meeting is being broadcast by the Council on our YouTube channel and will be there for future watching by members of the public, and I'm aware that Councillor Condacor is also recording this for his own purposes. Do we have any apologies? All of the Cabinet members are here. That moves us on to declarations of interest. I do have one additional declaration of interest beyond those which are printed. All members of the Cabinet have received an email from the Chair of the Bedworth Community Interest Company regards to item 7. A reply has been sent which has been non-committal in terms of what Cabinet may or may not decide, and that was copied to officers who are conducting the process for the records to ensure that the bidding process is seen to be fair and accurate. And all Cabinet members have told me they have received that email. That moves us on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes. Is everyone happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record? Thank you. That leads us on to agenda item number 5, which is public consultation. I have a number of speakers who have indicated they wish to speak, and I would remind all speakers that they are supposed to be speaking to the agenda item which is being debated and considered by Cabinet tonight. This isn't a general forum for anything and everything. Comments should relate to the item under consideration, and if they don't, then I will bring them back to the agenda item in question. So just to go over who we do have speaking tonight, on agenda item number 6, which is the leisure operator procurement update, I have a lady called Rachel. Rachel, is there a surname to go with that? Sorry? Okay, then on agenda item number 7, which is the Bedworth Civic Hall update, I have Sam Margrave, Rachel Elizabeth, Nikki Smith, Joanne Browning, Rachel Hardy, Stephen Young. No? Okay, well, he still has time to get here if he wishes to do so. I'll just put a question mark by him for when I get there. Rob Batterby and Mrs. Condacor. Then the infrastructure maintenance framework, agenda item number 8, Rachel Elizabeth and Mrs. Condacor. Agenda item number 9, which is the tree service framework 23 to 27, Rachel Elizabeth and Mrs. Condacor. Agenda item number 10, which is commingling of recycling material collections, Rachel Elizabeth and Mrs. Condacor. Agenda item number 11, which is building a better borough, Rachel Elizabeth again and Michelle Condacor. Agenda item 12, the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicles Inspection Framework, Rachel Elizabeth and Michelle Condacor. Recommendations from Overview and Scrutiny Panels, Rachel Elizabeth. And then on agenda item 14A, which is any other items, Lily Pad Fountain, Sam Margrave and Rachel Elizabeth. I don't intend on deviating from the printed order given the number of speakers that we have on all the items. On the Lily Pad Fountain one? Yes, of course. So that leaves just Rachel Elizabeth to speak on the Lily Pad Fountain. Okay. So that moves us on then, now that we have the list of speakers, to the substantive items. So the first item is agenda item number 6, leisure operator procurement update. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report provides Cabinet with an update on the progress of the leisure operator procurement for the management of council leisure facilities within the borough. The Sport England contract model has been used as a template for the basis of the new contract documents and specification. The approved recommendation at Cabinet on the 8th of March is also being considered as part of any new arrangements made with the Matrix Academy Trust in relation to Eton Sports Centre, and I therefore present the report and recommendations as printed. Thank you.
Sorry, was that everything, Councillor Markham? Okay. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you very much. So we only have one public speaker on that, which is Rachel Elizabeth. You have 3 minutes. Thank you. When you speak, can you make sure that you use the microphone, and it's the big button that you press, please?
1, 2. Thank you. Are we on number 6 at the moment? Is that correct? Just thank you for clarifying. Thank you. So, with the leisure operating procedure, yes, we're feeling that this highlights the corporate nature, ideologies of the council. They have consulted and have had meetings with other corporate interests and employed consultants to draw up contracts. But at what cost to the taxpayer, we'd like to ask. But also the residents once again seem to be excluded from the aim of this process, any of this process at all, except for obviously paying for it. So my question is, well, have the residents who fund these projects, have they been asked if they are satisfied with the service provided? And if not, why haven't they? And how do you intend to include the residents and also the visitors to the outreach from, the outreaching areas to there? And I guess I'm looking for a name to talk to with further on that as well. Could I have a name? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rachel Elizabeth. I have to point out that when it's public speaking at Cabinet, it isn't questions and answers, it is statements from members of the public. And if you're after an officer name, the officer name is usually printed on the agenda item for the officer who is responsible. So you can always go through the customer service desk to approach them on that. Any points of clarification of the speaker? No? Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacle.
Good afternoon, Chair. A couple of things I wanted to pick up. Firstly, this mentions in 3.6 the cycling and things, but there's no mention of the skate park, if that's being included or excluded in the leisure management. But obviously, if it's all on the same site in Bedworth, it makes sense to think about, are we including looking after the skate park as well? Secondly, this contract will come in around when the administration may or may not change in May 2024, so an exact date would be useful. And obviously the new administration might want to do different things to this administration, so I hope there's some flexibility there in terms of what's going on. There's also the matter of Eton, which is mentioned in 3.9. I think the public need to be consulted on what's happening at Eton Sports Centre. I know there's things going on that are confidential, but I think just to disenfranchise them as you go down this bidding process is unfortunate. And finally, energy efficiency. The Build Back Better stuff, which is later in the agenda, obviously the council is looking at greening, or should be looking at greening, its leisure centres using more renewable energy and making them more efficient. And obviously that dialogue needs to be had as part of the procurement exercise, so we know who gains, who pays the electric bill, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacle. Any points of clarification? Anything officers want to come back on this particular item? Director Hollis.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the current leisure contract ends on the 31st of March 2025. and because it was extended in 2020, I believe, February 2020. So the current leisure procurement contract doesn't end until the 31st of March 2025. The existing contract was 2024, but it was extended for the development of the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub and taking those forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any member of Cabinet wish to speak? No, in which case we'll move to the recommendations as printed. Can all those in favour please show? Okay, thank you. That is carried. That moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is the Bedworth Civic Hall update. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To move the expression of interest process to the next stage, the approval needs to be provided on the preferred option for the Council of a freehold, lease or procurement concession service of the Bedworth venue, based upon the evaluation of the EOIs and the review and analysis of the options details above. A lease option would appear to be the most effective proposal for the Council to consider at this stage. This would enable the ownership of the building to remain within the Council, which will aid future visioning for Bedworth. It will also enable external partners to operate the venue, albeit negotiations would be required by the estates and legal teams and future financial implications from the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. The procurement service concession route could be retained as a contingency option should the lease route be unsuccessful. Both EOIs have identified potential options for moving forward, and I therefore present the report and the recommendations as printed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham, and I'll second that from the Chair. So we have 8 public speakers. Can I just double check whether Stephen Young has... Okay. If he does turn up in the meantime, I'll still take him, but once we move on, I'm afraid that's it. So, Mr Margrave, you're the first speaker.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This report and the break clause for development and future visioning shows that you still want to demolish the Civic Hall Arts Centre and Library to undertake the Transforming Bedworth plans. You commissioned plans in April 2022 that meant demolition, all while telling people the Civic Hall was safe in your hands and would reopen. Bulldozers might not come in tomorrow, but it's clearly your ambition to knock parts of Bedworth down, and that's not levelling up, it's levelling down. If it's not true, tell us today. Promise not to knock the Civic Hall down and progress the Transforming Bedworth plans. You previously said the Civic Hall is a 1970s carbuncle, and I wonder whether you take back that comment and recognise the value the Civic Hall brings. The Civic Hall and Arts Centre is at the heart of the High Street. The community bid would bring in significant investment to Bedworth, regeneration and revitalisation, creating entrepreneurship and working from home space, reopen the Civic Hall and Arts Centre, open a viable bar with food and wider commercial offering, using profits to fund investment and community groups to use the building. For example, to support the community to employ a youth worker or have events for young people and to tackle town centre crime. We could have already applied for the Community Ownership Fund and gotten money into Bedworth with the help of our local MP, but the council haven't yet agreed to support a community bid. So why is the council preventing investment into Bedworth, knowing a private business or the council can't apply for these grants? Why do you hate Bedworth? Why won't you give the community the keys by transferring the building to the community for £1 under an asset transfer, or use a long lease at a peppercorn rent like Nuneaton's Abbey Theatre? Why is that good enough for Nuneaton but not Bedworth? Because these plans still leave open the opportunity or the option to demolish a Civic Hall. That's going to make it very hard to make the building successful. Many feel that this process has not been fair, and the council doesn't really want the Civic Hall to become viable or to reopen, and you're still leaving demolition on the table. So local residents can see what the proposals the council are putting through and have their say through proper consultation. Will the council publish all the expressions of interest received and any assessment made? And will you keep the details secret so no one can mark your homework? Because this needs accountability and consultation of local people. It needs local residents to have the say on what happens next to the Civic Hall, not just a handful of people in the cabinet. And I would urge you to look again at this report and the leasing options, and to think how your decision today will impact a serious community bid, because you're actually stopping the community, not helping us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Margrave. Any points of clarification? No? In which case we'll move on to Rachel Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yeah, so with the Civic Hall, I'd just like to say firstly, in my own experience of the Civic Hall, in my growing up when I was younger, the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra travelled there. They used to travel around, but they came to Bedworth Civic Hall, and it was wonderful. I went there with my gran, and it was beautiful. And I feel, to bring that to a community is wonderful. So what a wonderful place that was for me. Thank you. So more to that. Thank you. So it does seem the involvement from anyone from the Transforming Bedworth team in this process would be a huge conflict of interest. Basically, as any of the funding for the Transforming Bedworth would apply, would need the council to have vacant possession of the Civic Hall when the demolition process planned by the Transforming Bedworth was due to start. So my understanding is that it has to be empty for you then to bulldoze it, and then to get your funding is in part of the planning for that. So what is the plan? What is the vision? Are we being transparent? We already have one example in the Borough in Nuneaton where the town and its economy has been destroyed by a project that has cost over £1 million in lost revenue and 250,000 lost customer visits to the town in 1 year. With more destruction planned in Nuneaton will probably cease to exist as a market town if left to Transforming Nuneaton destructive programme, seemingly. For this reason, anyone involved in Transforming Bedworth should be disqualified from the process of interest of fairness and transparency. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification?
Yes.
No. Okay, thank you very much. Nikki Smith.
Councillors, as a public health nurse and a parent of a child involved in dance and the arts, I'm passionate about getting the Civic Hall reopened. The Civic Hall isn't just a theatre or a bar, it can be so much more, benefiting local people's well-being, tackling isolation, physical and mental health, and offering opportunities to level up the local economy. Community asset transfer gives communities who feel that a building or area of land is valuable to lose the ability to do something about it. The main ways available are to buy the asset outright or to transfer it into community ownership if that is acceptable to the local authority who owns it. The council haven't considered the benefit to the community or the community group of transferring the asset for £1, as so many other councils have done. Why do the council want to keep ownership of a venue where they acknowledge they haven't run well and aren't fit to maintain? While no specific time is given for the lease, 10 years is mentioned as an example. The report does not consider the requirements of the Community Ownership Fund or other grants that require a lease of at least 15 years. Will you ensure there is a lease of at least 15 years? How will the break clause impact any community group application for grants? The council also said they want a third sector solution, and yet to you, in a recent email, you said you won't rule out a private business's bid to privatise the Civic Hall. Why won't you support a community group bid? What will the points criteria in the next stage be? And will the council support a community bid and make it an expectation that any bidder has a third sector structure to bring in grant funding and will provide community uses in the Civic Hall and the Arts Centre?
Okay, thank you very much. Any points of clarification? No? In which case we'll move on to Joanne Browning.
Good evening. Last year, the council said the EOIs will be evaluated by a panel of MBBC officers and may seek some external professional advice. And assessment guidelines have been shared under supporting documents. However, we are now told there has been no assessments, evaluation or criteria for awarding points. To decide on who goes through to the next stage, and both bids are being put through, in the words of the leader of the council. so neither party can claim foul that their bid has been rejected at this stage. That isn't the process that we were told that would be undertaken to decide who would get through the next EOI process. The council seem to be changing the goalposts, and despite previously committing to a third sector bid, are now allowing a private business to apply. Because rules don't seem to have been followed, and the process doesn't seem to have been undertaken as set out in the documentation, will the council ask someone independent to assess the EOIs again? Will any bid be awarded to only those who commit to delivering community use of the building and top-class acts, not just another club in the town with amateur music, food and a bar? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any points of clarification? No? Rachel Hardy.
Good evening. We've been working hard with local people who want the Civic Hall and Arts Centre to reopen, to be run by local people for the whole community. At the full council meeting in December, the council voted for a motion that said the expressions of interest process have been launched to move on the running of the Civic Hall to a third sector model. However, this report does not say whether both bidders are third sector community groups or if they will provide community use at the Arts Centre and Civic Hall. Has the council put through any private businesses to the next stage? Does that go against the motion passed at full council in December? Are the council privatising the Civic Hall? What is the length and terms of the lease that is being offered? The Abbey Theatre is on a peppercorn rent, and other council facilities are let out to community venues. Community venues are let out on these terms. What annual rent will the council be charging a community group potentially? Will it be £1? Why is the council refusing to hand over the whole building to the community under an asset transfer for £1 as it did with others? There is no consideration of what not selling the building to the community or break clauses in any lease mean for a community group or applications to grants such as the Community Ownership Fund. The report mentions the transforming Bedworth plan and developing the site that would see the Civic Hall demolished and made smaller. Are the council still pushing that plan, or will you stop plans to demolish the Civic Hall today? Is the council making it harder for a community group and stopping the Civic Hall being a thriving success? Why do the council want to hold on to an asset that the community paid for, if it means it won't be as successful? For example, if a community group owned the building, they could borrow against it to invest in capital works. In positive news, we've got an event planned on the 12th of May, only a few tickets remaining. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any points of clarification? No? I'll skip to Rob Batterby to give Mr Young a chance, unless anyone knows whether he is definitely coming. He's definitely not. Okay, thank you. Mr Batterby.
The Civic Hall and Arts Centre have given me, as well as many other residents of Bedworth, Bulkington, Nuneaton, access to opportunities that otherwise would be unavailable to people in a former mining and post-industrial town. Both venues have been a gateway to the creative industries for a significant number of people I have been connected to personally, and probably many more besides, forging long-term friendships and giving valuable experience of the industry. Under the proposed plans, the Civic Hall would be demolished to be replaced with vague promises of a new performance space for the town. As Nuneaton CIO have found, funding for such a big-ticket venture is not necessarily forthcoming. A similar scenario could play out in Bedworth, but with worse outcomes. The building demolished and no construction confirmed, leaving Bedworth without any arts provision at all. The impact of this will be acutely felt in a location identified as having low participation in the arts and creative economy. The Civic Hall complex being repurposed as a community creative economy hub is what I would like to see as a positive outcome from this process. Indeed, there is evidence that creative economy-led policies can have positive, albeit partial, local impacts on employment outside those core creative industries. Current models of urban regeneration have favoured demolition over reusing, repurposing and retrofitting of existing buildings. There is evidence that this approach often fails to deliver the promised change for an area, primarily because there isn't a deep understanding of place and context and provision of meaningful services for residents. Reuse and retrofitting is now seen as a business opportunity in the architectural and development community. There has been some discussion of the carbon costs of the current building, but a failure to acknowledge that a current strategy to demolish the largest building on the proposed development plot would vastly increase the project's total carbon budget, coming from the embodied carbon in the current building to the upfront carbon costs inherent in any new build. I would urge the Council to be partners in pioneering a new model for urban regeneration through repurposing, retrofitting and, where required, of existing infrastructure, where the creative economy and entrepreneurship combine to present new opportunities and a sense of pride for Borough residents. There is an example in the Borough of a community hub in a similar format, which is Saints in Nuneaton. If the Civic Hall is to be retained under Council ownership, will the Council consider favourable terms of lease and rent? An existing example of this is the Abbey Theatre, as had been previously mentioned. Will the Council also consider terms of 10 to 20 years? Terms of less than 10 years would rule out community ownership. Are the Council able to consider an asset transfer to a community charitable body? If not, what reasons would there be for such a decision? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Batterby. Any points of clarification? No, in which case we move on to Michelle Condacourt.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, previous speakers have covered most of the points that I was going to raise. And it's just to say that reading through the paperwork for the meeting, I just felt very sad that you still seem intent on demolishing it eventually. It's a massive asset to Bedworth, and it should be the basis of the transforming Bedworth, project. I can't underestimate, I can't bring the words to say the value that place has. I used to go so frequently from the time when I moved up to this area and things, and just hearing what's going on and things, it's just really, really sad. Use what we've got. It's a massive asset, and we need to just grab it and keep it and build on it.
Okay, any points of clarification? No, in which case we'll move to any non-cabinet member. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you very much. A lot of things in this borough have quite long leases. You look at the Rope Walk, I don't know if it's 99 years or 199 years. Commercial organisations are given long leases so they can plan and do the things needed for a building. And I would say something like the Civic Hall, the groups wanting to run it should be given at least 30 years, because a lot of infrastructure, if you want solar panels on the roof, if you want to do boiler replacement, all these things, the life of the thing you're using, boilers, whatever, is 20 years or whatever. So to get the value back, you need a long lease. Obviously, the council wants to retain the freehold, but I would really like the council to give whoever wins this a 30-year lease, so they've got a good run at it, and they can invest and get money to do the transformational things to the building that will give it another 30 years life. Because there's things that wear out in buildings, but the big embedded energy is those big concrete and brick walls. And it's actually a very economic shaped box. The whole energy balance, if you've got a large building that's very square and it's got a massive thermal mass, is actually very good. And what we need to do is take that and turn it into a massive asset for the community to do stuff. There's very little left in Nuneaton and Bedworth at the moment, and I think just giving the bidders a very good run at this by giving them a 30-year lease would be great. And I keep asking, what is the book value of this building? Because it is so old now, and the way buildings get depreciated, it might be on our books at £1, or it might be on the books at £10, or £1 million, or £10 million. But we need to work that out and work out what we're doing with a financial model so that we can effectively write off any value if we think it's worth anything, transfer it to the community, and the community will save this council £100,000 a year or whatever by doing all the work that we used to pay people to do. And it will bring people into the car parks and the other businesses. So this is a massive opportunity, and we need to have a long lease to make that happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any points of clarification? No? Any other non-cabinet member? No? In which case we'll move to debate. Councillor Markham, you wanted to come back in?
If I could just come back on a couple of points that were made, please, if I can. It was said that we as Cabinet have seen the EOIs. Well, in fact, we haven't. We've seen one EOI, and that was because it was sent to yourself. We certainly haven't seen the other one, because that's not our role, so we haven't seen them. The EOIs that have submitted have got private financial details on, so therefore they shouldn't be published. The lease and the rent is something that you as a group and the other applicant are going to have to negotiate at the next stage. It isn't for us to set. And regarding the EOIs, at this stage, we cannot prefer one EOI over another because it defeats the whole process. And it actually says in the report, the lease would need to be of sufficient term to enable the tenant to secure a return on their investment in the property. That's actually set out in the report. So that's the only points I'd like to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. There are a number of things I'd like to come back on. I couldn't go through all of the points which have been raised by a number of the speakers, even if we had all evening, and a number of them are erroneous, false, and in some case, complete mistruths. This report isn't about the demolition of the Civic Hall. It is clearly not about that. This is about the lease or otherwise of the Civic Hall and its future, whether we go down the lease option, whether we go down a procurement option, or the other two options. I think they're freehold and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. That is all we are considering. But I would stress again, for what seems like the 1000th time, the vision that was presented of the transformation of Bedworth was just that, a vision. It is not set in stone. It was an indication of what we could have, not what we will have. And as we have seen with transforming Nuneaton, the initial vision that you have at the start isn't necessarily what you end up with at the end, because things evolve, things change, circumstances change. So let us be absolutely clear that this is not about the demolition of the Civic Hall. But what we do have to do is protect the interests of this council. It is not just the residents of Bedworth who have paid for the Civic Hall. I think some people are forgetting, actually, there are other components of this borough who have paid towards the Civic Hall since its inception, namely the areas of Bulkington and Nuneaton. They have also paid through their council tax over, close to 50 years now, for the upkeep and sustaining that building. And we have to protect the interests of everyone in the borough. Now, Mr. Margrave referenced a range of benefits to what may come from the CIC bid. That may be true. I don't know. But the whole point is we need to assess it independently and fairly so we can see whether those benefits are actually something we can realise. You wouldn't just hand over a multi-million-pound business to someone who hasn't actually demonstrated they can do everything they have said. That would be foolhardy and madness, particularly with residents' taxpayers' money. Now, if those are, and it happens to be, that the CIC bid is the best, and I said this at full council in December, if the CIC bid is the best and it scores the highest, fair play. You'll be awarded the contract and you'll be able to go forward and do what you have said in your bid. But it would be negligent of us to discount any other bid at this stage, which may, and I emphasise the word may, be better. What concerns me throughout this entire process is it feels to myself and the rest of Cabinet that there are certain members of the CIC and their associates who are focused on denigrating any other bid to try and boost theirs. That isn't what should be happening. I would urge you most strongly, forget what other bid may be coming in. That is irrelevant to you in a number of ways. Focus on your own bid and making it the best it possibly can, because you're putting all your energy into something else when you should be focusing on selling what you can possibly do for the town of Bedworth. And if you are the best, then you will be awarded the contract. And that is what a competitive tender process is. And that's what we must do. We cannot go round giving you advice and support, because Again, and the phrase was mentioned earlier, about marking your homework. If our officers were to support you in putting that together, they would be putting themselves out of the whole process because they would not be impartial anymore. And this whole thing about hating Bedworth, that is an absolute load of tosh, to be quite honest. And people have mentioned this thing about if Nuneaton can have it, why not Bedworth? Well, actually, let's look at it the other way round. Bedworth have had over £800,000 a year spent on it with the Civic Hall every year, plus. Some years it hit £1 million plus, 1.2 million plus in terms of its expenditure after everything came in terms of ticket sales, revenue, bar, etc. That didn't happen for Nuneaton. This is about making sure that we can sustain what goes on. And as Councillor Markham said, in terms of the lease length, that is completely up for negotiation. We haven't set any predetermined amount on that. If your bid gets through, or the other bid, then it will be up to officers to have those conversations with whoever to work out which is the best bid, the best length of lease for both the council's interests and for yours. If that happens to be 15, 20 years, then so be it. But I'm not going to limit myself or the council at this stage because that would be unfair. We don't know what is going to happen. And if it is someone else who takes it on, whether it is another company, that is an alternative model of provision that this council does not provide. So I think it fully complies with what we set out in earlier motions. So please stick to getting your own bid to be the best it can be. And if it is, I will wish you the best of luck and hope that you do the best. But at the end of the day, you need to prove that. And surely, as residents of Bedworth and residents of the borough, you want the best bid no matter who it comes from. And you should be gracious enough to say, actually, fair play, yours was better, and if you can do it, you will have our full support. And I would hope that the other bidder would say the same. And I would emphasise as well, none of the Cabinet have had discussions with the party involved. The only people who have contacted us have been from the CIC. I can hand on heart say that, and any communications have been copied into officers so that it can be seen to be above board. And when we had a town centre partnership meeting, which I run roughly once a quarter with town centre businesses, I deliberately had it not at that venue. I had it moved to the ex-servicemen's club so that there could be no allegations of impropriety. I wasn't going to go down that route so that both sides were seen to have it fair. I know it might not be the news you want, but I'm trying to lay it open and honestly as I can for you. With that said, are there any other comments from Cabinet? No? In which case, can we move to the vote, please? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. In which case, we will move to agenda item number 8, which is the infrastructure maintenance framework. I'll just give a minute for members of the public to leave if they wish to.
Thank you, Chair. The infrastructure maintenance framework budget is to seek approval for the creation of an infrastructure maintenance framework. A new infrastructure maintenance framework will combine works from corporate assets, maintenance of car parks and associated town centre street furniture, and green spaces to provide a cost-effective and value-for-money framework for a number of common tasks utilising a joint framework for both teams, which will make the potential works more attractive to local, small and medium-sized enterprises, who will be able to bid for one or more lots in the framework depending on the speciality and capacity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Golby, thank you. We have 2 speakers on this item. Rachel Elizabeth, you're first.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 8. Given that the council have failed in its duty to comply with health and safety regulations in Bedworth, we know about the skate park and obviously the week of problem there.
Rachel
wasn't
Elizabeth, that isn't what
informed.
is on the report today. Can you please
Oh, am
stick to the
I
report?
sorry? The destruction of the Lily Pad Foundation.
That
and
isn't on this
associated
agenda item
seating.
either, Rachel Elizabeth.
Okay, all right. Can I just ask, as a statement maybe, could you all go to undergroundpress.co.uk and look at Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 and how that fits into your own agendas and which side of history you're on, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In which case we'll move on to Mrs. Condacourt.
Thank you. I just want to raise my concerns on the financial implications. It says we have assumed a zero inflation approach to budgeting for the lifetime of the contract framework from existing revenue budgets. Now, with inflation as it is, I know you can't know in advance what the rate of inflation is going to be over the time period and things, but to have a zero inflation approach seems to be quite ludicrous.
Mrs. Condacourt, can I just ask you to stop for a minute? Is the door... Okay. Sorry about that, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Right, shall I start again?
I'll let you start again. Can we reset the clock, please?
Sure, I won't talk for 3 minutes anyway. It's just on the financial implications. It says we have assumed a zero inflation approach to budgeting for the lifetime of the contract. Now, that seems a bit sort of mad to me. We're not going to have zero inflation, much as it'd be great to have it. And obviously, over the lifetime, I can't remember how long the period would be for this framework. But
I am sorry, Mrs. Condacourt. Something is going on from someone out in the public, just in case anyone is watching. We aren't deliberately stopping. There's some disruption out on the landing. I'm assured that the disruption has now left the building. I do apologise, Mrs. Condacourt. Please carry on. I did hear the bit that you were starting on.
yeah, I mean, obviously you can't, know what inflation rate is going to be over the period thing, but to assume a zero inflation approach seems, wrong. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any points of clarification on that? Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you. From what Councillor Guttridge said, I hope this is all going into one contract, but actually will be a group of contracts for different sorts of things. And one thing I want to bring up was all the new infrastructure we've got on new development sites, like church fields, because we haven't yet transferred any of that stuff over to be adopted by the Borough Council. And when it is moved over, there is usually a cash payment, so the developer will pay so many years' worth of maintenance for a playground or a bit of open space to the Borough Council to then pay for the infrastructure maintenance, which then will go into this contract. So I wanted some reassurance that, A, that process was actually going to be hurried up because we've got infrastructure that's sitting around on development sites not being maintained, and B, that that's actually being taken account of in these new proposals. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification of what has been said? Anything officers want to come back on? No? Did you want to come back, Councillor Gutteridge?
Can I just answer Mrs Condacourt's question or statement? There is a provision based on the September CPI of allowing the contracts to go up or down, depending on the rate of inflation. Thank you.
Thank you. In which case, is there any other Cabinet member wishing to speak? No? Can we then move to the vote? All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 9, which is the Tree Service Framework 2023 to 27. Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. This is to seek approval for the creation of a tree services framework. A new tree service framework will build on the lessons learned from the current contract and the combined works from both the General Fund and the HRA Fund budgets will provide a cost-effective and value-for-money service, utilising a joint framework of both service areas, which also make the potential works more attractive to local small and medium-sized enterprises. The current framework commenced in 2019 and was let initially for 2 years with a 1+1 extension, and the framework ends on 30th of September 2023 with no ability to extend. So we would like to extend. We would like to put it out to tender.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gutteridge. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Golby, thank you very much. Mrs Condacourt, you're the only one left to speak from the public.
Right. Well, it's a similar thing from what I said on the previous item and things again. And it said, I know Councillor Gutteridge, said about this uplift in it and things, but it does say on here that this will mean that over the lifetime of the contract, the quantity of work that can be undertaken will diminish in real terms. Now, trees will continue to grow. Hopefully, we'll have even more trees that we'll have planted because they're desperately needed for all sorts of reasons that I don't need to go into now, because I'm sure you're well aware. So, again, I'm just concerned that it's not really covering adequately, the finances for the period for which it will operate.
Any points of clarification? No? Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
I'm quite keen on trees, and sadly, sometimes we have to chop them down because they're either unsafe, particularly close to where people walk or play areas or whatever, or they've been planted in such a ridiculous place, like there was a conifer on Ryde Avenue that was just so close to the fence and should never have been planted there. So we lose trees. We're losing 3 trees for every one we're planting at the moment, and it's particularly acute in the housing budget. So I'm very concerned about budgets going down because we'll carry on doing the safety work but getting less and less trees if we don't have a slice of budget to actually bring some new trees into our borough. We are massively under-forested as a borough. Apart from the Arbury estate, there is very few trees in Nuneaton and Bedworth. And a lot of our residents, particularly in council housing, pay fees either through the leasing or through the rent towards gardens and etc. And they would expect to have some suitable trees that are planted regularly to replace the ones that naturally come to the end of their lives. So I really do ask the Cabinet to ensure that both the General Fund and the Housing Fund have the provision to plant a new generation of trees of a suitable size and type, and we can actually make the borough a more beautiful and desirable place to live and improve people's mental health by having trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Any points of clarification to Councillor Condacourt? Is it clarification or just entering debate now? Is it clarification or we're just going into debate and general comments? Okay. Just before I come on to that, no other points of clarification for Councillor Condacourt? Okay. Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you, Leader. We have approximately, I like trees, Councillor Condacor. I'm very fond of trees. I like going down to the Arboretum in Gloucestershire in the autumn to see the different coloured leaves and the different varieties of trees. I'm very passionate on trees. We have approximately over 122,000 trees in the borough. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of trees in the wrong tree in the wrong place, but we've also got a lot of trees in the right place. And as you can notice, I've planted more trees than we have taken out this year, just recently, and I will continue to plant trees where I can find available space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Any other member? No, in which case we'll move to the recommendations as printed. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to the agenda item number 10, commingling of recycling material collections. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report provides the required information on the proposed changes from dual stream recycling collections, i.e. cadmium bins and dry mix recycling, to commingled collections, which is all together in the same bin, and enables Cabinet to assess and approve the recommendations. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council are the only local authority currently in the Warwickshire Waste Partnership operating a dual system collection method. There is evidence outlined in this report highlighting both time and cost benefits to commingled collections, especially when the new Sherborne MRF is up and running. It is anticipated that material quality will be maintained and on sales unaffected by changing to commingled. There may be some disposal increases to start with, but the evidence identified in the report suggests that associated peripheral savings mitigate any disposal increases aligned to the commingled collections, and overall, therefore, this offers best collection method for the residents, the Nuneaton and Bedworth Waste Management and Recycling Collection Partners. And I therefore present this report and, based on the evidence outlined, ask that Cabinet support the changes from dual stream recycling to commingled collections. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham, and I will second that from the Chair. We have one public speaker left on this, Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. One thing that's not mentioned at all in this report is education. And we really, if we're going to get better recycling rates, which it's easier for people, so theoretically we should get better recycling rates, although just having seen the table in here, it suggests that North Warwickshire actually went down once it went to commingled, so I do have a bit of a concern on that. But it's really, really important, if everything is going in the one thing, that people know what mustn't go in there, because the risk, and I think it is in the report, of contamination is so much greater when everything's together. You know, when we've got it in our dual system, if contamination happens in the paper and things, it's only that bit which is contaminated. But if it's all together, the whole caboodle is, contaminated. So we need to go hand in hand with any changes, education of people, so they know what can go in, what can't go in, and the reasons behind it. People don't understand that they can't put pizza boxes in the cardboard recycling because of the grease and things, and it's things like that which need to be just push, at every single level. So please make sure we have loads of education so that we actually do increase rates and not end up with a decreased rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Condacor. Any points of clarification? No? Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
I started my political life in the gallery about 17 years ago when we had the waste strategy in 2005 in this council. For a short while I was an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management. And I totally agree with what Michelle says. the whole system needs really good education. And one great thing about the whole of Coventry and Warwickshire moving to nearly identical systems is we can start to have education across Coventry and Warwickshire. Because when every different borough and the city had different systems, it was very hard because the bin lids were different, everything was different. So this is actually a massive opportunity to actually take a step change forward. The technology in our sorting plant enabled it to happen. 15 years ago, the sorting plants were absolutely rubbish. We couldn't have commingled and get the quality there because the computers and the robots and things just were not there. So it is a massive opportunity, but we really need to get it working well. We need people putting the right stuff in and not putting the wrong stuff in. And we need a community buy-in, because if we can save £70,000 by having less contamination, that is £70,000 we could spend on Civic Hall or flowers in the town centre or whatever, or cheaper car parking, whatever. So the less of a burden waste and recycling gets, because we've got that education and that buy-in, the better. So I hope to have a tour one day soon of the sorting plant, and I really want this to be successful. So can we please really start to look at putting some money into the education and having this a success story, because it could actually change us to be not a fourth quarter or third quarter recycling in the league tables, but get to at least second quarter performance tables. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification first? Is this clarification or debate? Okay. Any points of clarification first? In which case, Councillor Guttridge.
I fully support this. I wish it was coming in next week. I've spoke constantly with Councillor Markham about this, and I know she's already talking about education, i.e. I'm sure that Councillor Markham will be doing a video with our comms team, so I fully support it. It will save us money. We won't need to buy expensive split dustbin lorries. I'm old-fashioned, it's a dustbin lorry in me. We'll have one dustbin lorry, and it'll go and it'll pick the waste up. It will save a lot of this blowing about and of the litter across the borough, and it will make it better for the residents. One bin, put it all in, and we're sorted. I've just repeated myself. We've talked about how the unit works over at Coventry, how the dust lorries come in, tip it, and then it goes across a riddle, and the bits come off, and this, that, and the other with the robots. So I, like you, Councillor Condacourt, can't wait to get there to have a look, because I'm a bit of a geek on machines like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, we have to get it approved. We can't do any education until it's been approved. There are things in the pipeline that, like Councillor Guttridge has just said, but we need it to be approved first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. I share all the interest and in this report, because I think actually it's something that residents have been crying out for years. One of the things that we often get as councillors is, I can't get all the cardboard into the caddy, and then they get complaints that it's kept at the side of there. Then sometimes, depending on the weather, it gets blown down the street. You have complaints about whether the bin men will or will not take it, and you end up in a bit of a debate as a councillor with that. This will actually simplify the process, give more space, well, using the same amount of space, but give more space actually for things which are used more often, which is paper and cardboard. And as we saw during the pandemic, there was an explosion in the number of items which were cardboard or paper based. Looking at the stats which are printed in the report, I accept them at face value, although I do have a slight reservation about the use of the years 2021 and 21-22 because of the pandemic. And people's habits were so out of sync with normality. But I think that there is a general trend towards that, but I don't think you can over-rely on some of those stats at present because of the unusual circumstances for those years. And it does have the added benefit of saving us money as a council in the long term in various different ways. We have just been through the budget process, a difficult budget process where we have been literally line by line through a number of areas of expenditure, and this will help us in the future to actually do that. Whilst I would love to say that £70,000 could help reduce the car parking charges or reopen the Civic Hall, I'm afraid that is actually quite honestly small change compared to the actual costs of some of these things. But the principle is that those bits of savings here and there can actually help us maintain services elsewhere. And as Councillor Markham highlighted, if we aren't spending those extra 5 seconds per property having to divide up the bin contents, then if you think about the number of properties we have in the borough and will have in the borough, that can actually help with the round redesigns and keeping those as efficient as possible and reducing the extra expenditure we may and probably will have to incur as the borough expands for all the additional bin rounds that we need. So I think it is a step in the right direction and something that residents quite rightly have called for ever since the introduction of the brown bin, never mind the red box and then the various different coloured bags before that. So we're finally moving with the times, and I think it's something we should shout from the rooftops about. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 11, which is the Building a Better Borough refresh and review of the assessment document for 23-24. I don't intend to go into too much detail about this because there are quite a number of pages there, but needless to say, there have been some revisions after the first year of the operation of the Building a Better Borough document based on changes in circumstances, the economy, priorities changing, and having a look at what is actually achievable within our resources moving forwards, and actually things which are within our control more directly as a council. So I think it's actually a positive step in the right direction, and that it gives us a target to aim for in all of our directorates as Cabinet members and as the new strategic directors and the assistant directors when they're in post. And hopefully the redesign of the management structure will go a long way to actually helping to deliver the aims and objectives within this document. And I know, having my regular conversations with the Chief Executive, that officers are under no illusion that that is what we are seeking and needs to be done to move this council into a 21st century position. Does that receive a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Golby, thank you very much. We have one public speaker on this, which is Michelle Conticle.
Thank you. I mean, there was obviously a ton of stuff in here, so I can't go through every little bit and things, but some of the bits that seem sort of just not ambitious enough for me are on the sustainability aspects. That, you know, you're only talking about adopting a sustainability strategy for the council by March 2024. We needed it last year, several years ago, you know, and now is not soon enough. So, on the, you know, that is really, you know, disappointing. And some of the things about energy efficiency and what have you and things, you know, you're talking about 15 houses, 40 houses. Again, it's just not ambitious enough as far as I'm concerned. We could be much, much more ambitious. I won't go on more, but...
Okay. Any points of clarification for Mrs. Condicore? No? In which case, any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condicore.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle's just passed me the paperwork because there was only one copy between us and we aren't allowed to sit together. But there's a few things that really alarm me in terms of some of the deletions and changes, particularly like EV vehicles, etc. So I'm very concerned that we're losing our ambition and just aren't looking for the future we need to be going towards. And there's some deletions that are just bizarre, like ensuring planning application services fit for purpose. How can you delete that aim? That seems quite a good aim. And it is a massive document, and it should really have gone to scrutiny committees for their particular part of it to actually have like the planning one or the housing one, to go through some of these changes of our targets so we can actually make sure we're not watering them down. The other thing I really notice is how much stuff in this Build a Better Borough, as you call it, which we'll probably debate the title being accurate or not, relies on officer time. And the more things we do and the less and less officers we get after restructuring, we need to actually say actually officer time does cost money. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification? Any Cabinet member wish to speak? No? Just to respond to some of the points, actually, this Cabinet is very aware that officer time costs money. That is precisely why we have restructured the management team, because we cannot get the right officers in the right places for the amount of money that the market is going for. As Councillor Condacourt well knows, because I have said it often enough, and it was in agenda papers that went to full council, at the heads of level, or what we are now redesignating as assistant directors, we were paying 22% less than the average. Who on earth is going to come and work at an assistant director level with that amount of responsibility for 22% less than they can get elsewhere? The market demands dictate that. So we need to try and get the best people for the job, the best and the brightest, so we can actually take this borough forwards. I've said it before and I've said it again. We had one officer, head of planning, doing exactly the same job, went to another council, was paid £20,000 more than we could afford to pay them. That is ludicrous. And it's also ludicrous that we had the equivalent of 27 heads of reporting into 5 directors, into 1 chief exec. There are some large city councils which do not have that top-heavy management structure. We are a relatively small, in comparison, district or borough council, and we need to start cutting our coat according to our cloth. And that means making difficult decisions. And a number of the items within this report, within the BAB, require expenditure, but it also means that we need to have officers driving that forward at the right level to ensure that we deliver it. Otherwise, we will get nowhere. So I make no apologies for that to Cabinet or to the public. We have to make this authority fit for purpose. It has been languishing in the 1970s and 80s for far too long because the leadership of the council didn't have the vision to actually get on with the job. Councillor Golby, I do apologise. I didn't mean to insult you.
I should hope so as well. Just to point out that there is streamlining of services going on, particularly in my area, and they're doing an absolutely grand job. And we know that there's lots of pressures, and we know that there's stuff coming down the line, but it also isn't helpful when people come into public meetings and claim that my teams are not doing their jobs when they are. So that doesn't help retention, and it doesn't help recruitment. So perhaps, instead of criticising where it's not actually warranted, we should be offering more support. So I would just like to point that out. I did say in the last Cabinet meeting that my teams watch the Cabinet meetings and they hear what certain people are saying. And I know that after the last Cabinet meeting, Councillor Condacourt was contacted about his comments about the teams not doing certain jobs. And it turned out to be incorrect. Surprise, surprise. So that does not help recruitment and retention. So if we're all a little bit, we're all dishing this out, it cuts both ways. You have a part to play in this too.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Golby. Any other speaker? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 12, which is the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicles Inspection Framework. Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to ask Cabinet to approve contracts for the inspection of Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles licensed by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. The Council have invited competitive proposals for the provision of MOT and compliance testing for Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles which operate and are licensed within the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council area, only centres within the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council boundaries can be approved. Subject to the outcome of the procurement exercise, the Council is aiming to award a contract to 2 local garages within the borough, with an aim of ensuring sufficient capacity and agility to manage demand. The approval of this contract will provide the mechanism for ensuring that both Hackney and private hire vehicles are compliant with the conditions set out in the Council's policy document. This will bring about increased safety and confidence for members of the public when using our hired vehicles, and I therefore present the report and recommendations as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you. Mrs. Condicle.
Thank you. Obviously, this is really, really important, and I think in recent years things have improved, because in the past, when I first moved up to Nuneaton, sometimes some of the mini cabs and things that you saw going around, you did have to question whether they were actually legal and safe and things. So I've absolutely no problem with there being a framework and things. It's absolutely necessary and good. My only question is that it's, again, being done at such a late hour. The current contract expires on the 23rd of April. So this should have been done months and months ago. I've mentioned this umpteen times, you know, when the previous administration was in post, and also since you've, you know, took charge. And I just cannot understand that these contracts are not all marked up and there's a great war planner somewhere and things, so people know at what point they need to be doing things. You know, if I need to pay my credit card bill, I write it on my calendar a week beforehand, so I know, so it doesn't get missed and things. If something needs to be done at home, you know, that we need a lead-in time and things, then right, we need to look at this now. And I just don't understand how these things are coming up at councils that just, you know, oh, we can't call this in, there can be no discussion and things, because it needs to be done, you know, sometimes it's virtually yesterday. But, you know, so can we please have some better planning so that these things can be discussed if need be? This probably doesn't need discussing. I don't know, because I don't know the details of how it was, you know, dealt around, because I'm not in that field. But please, 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 can we have some planning so we don't have last-minute decisions that then can't be discussed?
Thank you, Mrs. Condicle. Any points of clarification? No? Any non-cabinet member? Okay. Any cabinet member wish to speak? In which case, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 13, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. No, I haven't got any public speakers on this one. The recommendation from Business and Regeneration OSP is there, and is actually addressed in most part by agenda item number 14A. So I will just move that Cabinet notes the recommendations of the OSP, and that a copy, if 14A is approved, that be sent to the Chair and the Committee in response to their recommendations. Is everyone happy with that course of action? Yes, Chair. Okay, all those in favour, please show. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Conical, did you want to speak on that one?
I'll speak on the next item. It's similar anyway.
That's what I was intending to do, but you were looking at me about something, so I wasn't sure whether you... Okay. Thank you. In which case, we will move to agenda item number 14, which is 14A, the lily pad seating plan and proposed changes there. So we do have the report in front of us with a diagram of what is being suggested for the area, and I would suggest that these are just to approve at Cabinet in principle tonight, so that further work can be done to actually model it up and begin the procurement, if necessary, of any of the new street furniture which will go in there. I did have a site visit, as reported in the report, alongside officers and Councillor Gutteridge as the portfolio holder for health and environment. We are looking at putting in additional seating, as we have always said that we wanted to do, and that there will be new planters put around that area, and that will be undertaken in consultation with Councillor Guttridge's department. And I know that discussions have already been had on that front about how we can do that if the recommendations are approved tonight. I would also point people towards, if they're asking what type of planters they are going to be, the conversations that we had with officers is along the lines of the ones by the bollards as you're approaching the toolbox from where the fountain currently is. They are fairly standard square substantial items, but they will be able to be moved out with, if necessary, when we have events on in that area. And I'm confident that when we do have events on in the town centre, it will make a big difference to the town centre, being able to put those on in a central place and encourage more people to come through and access it more easily. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as printed. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Croft, thank you. There are no public speakers, so I'll move on to non-cabinet. Councillor Condacourt.
It is really disappointing that the planned replacement wasn't done a lot earlier. I know going through the petition and all the scrutiny committees, people said, well, please tell us what's coming next. And because we haven't planned it earlier, we've now got the prospect of spending 35,000 or whatever, ripping out and putting block paving in, and then digging a hole in the block paving for the tree hole and doing bits so you can anchor benches. And it seems very inefficient the way it's being done. Also, the benches being put there, it's hard from the plan to see how long the benches are, but we've already got some benches by what used to be Marks and Spencer's, which are like 2.5 people benches, quite short ones. And I think one of the attractions of the round long bench was actually that two sets of people could agree to meet at their benches. So I do ask we actually have a variety of sizes of benches. And also one of the things the fountain did was provide a bit of an obstacle for the idiots driving down at speed from McDonald's and going the wrong way, effectively then down the next bit, which is one way in the opposite direction. So I do hope we will do some looking at how we put something there or what we do to actually provide a little bit of a chicane. And particularly if we've got planters and benches, if we put the planters on the west side, so effectively they're the first thing that gets hit when someone is less than sensible going down Marketplace from McDonald's. I say we want to make the best out of where we are. We can't change where we've got to and the money already wasted, but it would be good to actually get a useful meeting place, because the structure of that bit of the town centre made it a focal point, particularly with Coventry Street and the Rope Walk, and the people used to meet there. And I do hope we invest in a reasonable size of benches. And the final thing we lost is the signpost. We had a stainless steel directional post with arrows on, which I think has probably just gone in a skip or been used. I don't know what's happened to it, but a really good directional signpost there would be a real good sign. Yeah. So for people new to a town, if you go into a town and you get to a big T junction like that, having something that does say Rope Walk and toilets, if we had any toilets, etc., it'd be really useful to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Just to point out that the sign post was there, but there were no signs on it because people kept destroying them around there. So all we have removed is the post because there were no signs to keep on there. I do agree with Councillor Condacourt that it was a focal point, but it had become a focal point for antisocial behaviour and drinking and other undesirable activity. Indeed, whilst myself and Councillor Guttridge were on site, about 1:15, 1:30, there were a gang of 8 or 9 people just sat there casually drinking cider out the can in the midday sun. That is hardly the focal point that we want for our town centre. It is hardly the image we want to sell of our town centre, and it is hardly talking up our town centres either. This is clear, cast-iron action that we have taken to actually change behaviour in the town centre and try and address issues which have been boiling over for a long time, but no one had the guts to deal with them. Councillor Golby, you wanted to come in.
So this isn't a point of clarification, so yeah. So you've just asked about what events and what have you we're going to be putting on. Well, the first event I can actually bring now to Cabinet, because my communities team have been working on something in a confidential manner. And what I can say is we're going to have an iconic visitor to the town instead of the fountain. Where the fountain has been removed, we're actually having the Knife Angel. And it will be brought to town as part of the National Youth Anti-Violence Educational Programme, because I'm not only housing, I'm also communities. And one of the things that I have made a very, very strong point of in my tenure as portfolio holder for housing and communities is I feel we have a problem in this borough with criminality. I don't think I've made any secret of that fact. I mean, in fact, some people have referred to me in the past, when it was appropriate, as the pound shop Priti Patel, which actually is a badge that I wear with pride. So I'm all for cracking down on poor behaviour. I'm also all for education. And the Knife Angel is actually an educational programme. It actually brings home the tangible effect of what knife crime is. We've lost youth and kids too many times in this town. In fact, not just in this town, in the entire borough, to knives. And it's not getting any better. So my team have been working on this. We've been working in partnership with Warwickshire Police, with the PCC's office and with the County Council. We have secured the Knife Angel to come to town. It will be in Nuneaton Town Centre. We wouldn't have been able to put it there without the fountain being removed, because where we couldn't squeeze it in that spot. It's made from over 100,000 seized blades. And it was specifically created, I'm just reading some blurb, to highlight the negative effects of violent behaviour while solidifying our critical need for social change, which is something that I absolutely 100% believe in. I was totally incensed with the whole incident outside of Asda with the Friday afternoon thing. That actually kicked off me getting everybody in this chamber, which is something that was criticised again by the Greens because they weren't invited, on an operational level, to get all partners in this room to sort out the problems that we're having. That included the police, that included youth justice, that included county council, that included education. That was something that we did from here. This is a continuation of that. And we are absolutely determined that we are not only within our housing stock, which is something that we are doing, but out actually with kids, with education, with trying to bring the reality of knife crime to people who might think it's glorified on TikTok or on Facebook. But the reality is, people die. Kids die. Your friends will die if they are stabbed. We have to highlight this. So we're running an educational programme with schools. It's not just in Nuneaton. We're extending it out to North Warwickshire and Bedworth. And there will be more about this coming out in the next few weeks. But in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to start contacting partners. So before we went public doing that, I thought I would actually bring it to this chamber and announce it publicly here. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golbin. I think this highlights two things. One, what a superb work you and your team are actually doing on this, but also secondly, this is putting words into action. We said that we wanted this to become an event space and a focal point for the town centre, and we are doing just that. Councillor Guttridge, I saw that you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like just to pick up on 2 points. I fully applaud Councillor Golby for bringing the knife statue to the borough. We've lost too many young people in the borough. We lost a young chap in my ward, stabbed, unfortunately. And I do the ground care side, and the ground care, Glendale, they are picking up knives. They have picked up machetes not far from local schools. I fully applaud them because they waited while the police came. The police came, picked it up, and as a result of that, they charged a person with it. So I fully support that, and the education on knives. I would like to just pick up again on what Councillor Condacore said about street furniture benches. In the strategy we're bringing through from the parks, one of the things is the specification of benches. We want to get to the stage where we've got a specification of one bench that does everything. It's a universal street furniture bench that fits all parks, where we can look eventually to put them, having areas in the park where we can get them with memorial plaques and things like that. So we are working quietly behind the scenes. I'm very quietly working behind the scenes with the guys in the parks team, guys and girls, because we're all one team there, and that we'll look to bring in street furniture benches, a certain colour, certain size, so it's a standard job, so one size fits all. So we're not going to have longer benches, shorter benches. We'll have one size fits all, and we will look eventually to put memorial plaques on where people have lost people. You know, people in the borough, they come to us and want this, that and the other. So we've just said, just bear with us. We are working on it. And that's what we're doing at the moment, which we should hopefully know towards the end of the year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Anyone else wish to speak? No, in which case we'll move to the recommendations as printed. Can everyone please show? That is carried. Thank you very much. And that moves us on to agenda item number 15, which is the exclusion of the public and press. And I move it for the reasons as printed on the agenda. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Can we end the live stream, please? And thank you to members of the public who have attended.